Good morning, Ehi. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Good to
I
see you
am
on here.
very happy to be here.
Great, great,
Adjusting the
great.
camera a bit.
No,
My name is Ehi. I'm from Clearspace Labs. We take on important challenges. We try to improve the lives of people using advances in technology. And we explore the intersection between current trends and emerging technology and its impact on everyday life and how we could improve everyday life using technologies. Collaborate with lots of companies and try to figure out new ways of achieving impact.
great, great, great. So tell us a bit more about your COVID journey. Like what has your business looked like in terms of, technologies coming out of Africa and serving a global marketplace in a pandemic?
So the COVID journeys, I think the first shock was to a great extent nobody being sure what to do, and I think very clearly it was important to establish that the way to get out of this was to lead by values. So there's no grand design, there's no plan, there's no everything is extremely uncertain. It's typical VUCA environment, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. And the only things which sort of stood true are values. So take care of your people, take care of your customers, cut your costs, and explore your opportunities. So go back to the basics of what's core, what's central, what's at the focus, and let that drive everything else. So we did exactly that. And tried to execute on making sure that across our business and across our portfolio, we stuck with how are people doing? How do we make sure that they're safe, they're protected, and as much as possible, we don't lose any jobs. I'm happy to say we kept everyone.
Oh, fantastic.
So we shut down office space, we reorganized the company, whatever it is, but we kept the people, which was
Okay.
which is important. And then focus on different segments. Obviously, healthcare became sort of top priority, and we've been working in healthcare for the last 2 years. So
On the continent or abroad? You've been serving global
on the
global clients.
continent.
So tell us a bit more about what that's looking like at the moment. What are the opportunities beyond? Of course, healthcare is one that's come up. Food security is obviously top of the list as well. But what are the opportunities you've seen in terms of the skill sets that you guys deploy?
What was obvious was universal access to healthcare was not available, and obviously big problem. And then second was the pulling together of resources. So where resources needed the most and how do we make them available? And that path led us down a project with one of the leading private hospitals and the only, at the time, private testing facility for COVID-19 to scale the scope of a platform we've been working on to better facilitate access to healthcare via the internet and make it as universally affordable as possible. So it's against the application of technology to what we thought was an important, pertinent problem. And so yeah, that was our response.
Okay, and what do you identify as the biggest opportunities for tech companies, for the tech industry in Africa at the moment?
Well, there's obviously it used to be the digitization, but it's actually the virtualization, which is a slightly different, it's a subtle but important shift. So digitization is making everything digital. Virtualization is the idea that there is a combination of what is real and what is virtual, and there is an interconnection. So it's remote access and physical access at the same time. And so we're seeing everyone's having to figure out how you bridge a real world and a virtual world. So it's no longer just a digitization of assets. It's now it's now a virtualization of the world. So it's a lot of connected things working in a new space, and how that is affecting everything. So there's a virtualization of work, there's a virtualization of healthcare, there's the virtualization of employment, there's virtualization of church, there's virtualization of family. I mean, everything is, you have this new emerging world, which is connected with its own money, its own spaces, its own protocols, and you're seeing these trends across board. So it's the biggest opportunity is the virtualization of everything.
So how do you, everyone's talking about tech, and you're talking about virtualization, digitalization is high on the agenda. But what do you feel Africa needs to do to make sure that we get the adoption of, of course, data is expensive, there are a lot of limitations on the infrastructure side. What would you say would be your advice on improving the uptake of digital and virtual tools, whether it's from education to healthcare to, every walk of life?
Africa is the ultimate economic man. It rationalizes absolutely, and the things that don't make sense don't make sense. So anything you're going to do in Africa it's either got to make sense or it's not going to fly. And there is no big stroke. There's no one size fits all. There is no silver bullet. We have to do this, and if we do this, everything's going to be fine. That's not going to happen. But we do have a real problem with skill, and the fact that with the advances in technology, there is a skill deficit in the virtual world. So there's significant work needs to be done in getting people to participate in a new economy, because as you find that a virtualization of almost everything, people are going to need to adopt and learn new skills. So at the base level, we have a fundamental skill problem and a skill deficit. And I think that if there's one thing that needs to be tackled across industries, this would be my first. How do we improve the quality of skill set?
Are you in that space at all, in the education space and skills development space?
Not at all. We at the early days of exploring a project on the applications of AI in skill set matching, what we'd call precision learning. So you have that. There's lots of curated learning and training content, like you have with things like Udemy and Coursera, and there is demand. There is companies who need specific skills, and then there's obviously an unemployed population, but there isn't quite yet a way to match the unemployed population with the skills needed to get them employed. And so we're in some very early days of research on how AI could better help identify the top skills which organizations need and match them into real world training, which we hope would ultimately improve people's ability to be trained and to get that. So very early, very, very early stage work.
We're watching the space then. We'll definitely be watching that space, because that's definitely a requirement.
Yes, it's something definitely to look forward to. So that's one. And then obviously there is there's healthcare, which we think is really important now. And the problems with healthcare are complex. It's a whole ecosystem which spans multiple industries, from finance to government, legal, regulatory, supply chain, manufacturing, and service delivery across board. And we the complexity of that industry means that you need strong alliances, and healthcare is a top priority. It's a complex industry, multiple parts to be bridged, And so to scale up on something like healthcare for us, I think you need to sort of approach a collaborative partnership a way to getting these things done, because it's too big for any one company or any one individual to go after. But there needs to be simpler access. There needs to be cheaper access. And we think that with the right tools and infrastructure in place, it's possible.
The right tools and infrastructure. So talking about infrastructure, what would you say to the president of the world, the president of Africa, in terms of, you know, improving infrastructure for the masses to adopt technology, for tech entrepreneurs like yourselves to be able to scale your businesses in a more conducive manner? What would you say again, no broad strokes, I get it, you know, totally, but what would your top 3 or 4 things be to actually tackle the infrastructure deficit?
So we need to think really broad. I mean, 5G is definitely worth looking at this point in time. It's looking very good. But I would even suggest we should probably be thinking more satellites than ground-based, because laying infrastructure is expensive, it's difficult, it's hard, and it's prone to being broken. And so, yes, you need some sort of revolutionary ideas like what Tesla's doing with, SpaceX is doing with Starlink, group of satellites, or Google with Loom. I think we need some broad infrastructure strokes which give us blanket coverage and enable us to operate without the limitations of physical barriers. That's one. We need access to interregional trade. So this is a big thing. Africa needs to trade more with Africa. And the barriers, it's unbelievable, the barriers to making this happen. It's ridiculous. It's just, it's unreal. So you have a huge billion people market with no ability for them to trade and move things about. And I think these are huge infrastructure deficits, which at the continental level need to be addressed.
You're not too confident about the free trade agreement as it looks right now?
No,
there's a lot of detail to be ironed out.
Yeah, I don't think it's, I think it needs entrepreneurs. It doesn't need governments. I think it needs entrepreneurs. I think we need, I think there's technology infrastructure which can make it happen. But we need very simple things. We need a cryptocurrency registry, allow people trade currencies across different countries in a simple, transparent, easy manner. We need simpler taxes so that goods bought in one. We are not too worried about people traveling anymore. That's virtualization of economy says trade can be done without moving. That's not the problem. Goods still need to move. And for that to happen, you need the infrastructure to do settlements. You need the infrastructure to check the integrity of the transactions. And I think that if we had to say what's an agenda, Alibaba and eBay have done more for China trade than governments and free trade agreements. So can you create the sort of environments which allow transactions and things like that to happen across borders simply, easily? And so that would be my
is that something you guys are looking at? Is that area something that you might be dabbling into in the future?
Yeah, well, yes, exploring.
But it's a heavy lift. It's a heavy lift.
Yes, we still have a few tricks in the bag. So
okay. Watch this space. Watch this space.
Yeah, still have a few tricks in the bag, so we'll see.
Okay. Wishing you well with that, because we need you. We need this. We need these solutions. And what would you say to corporations? You know, we've seen a lot of corporate innovation centers popping up all over the world. What would you say to corporates and boards in terms of supporting the ecosystem through procurement policies and stuff like that?
Right. So look, the innovation is a tricky thing. What's going to happen is somebody's going to eat your lunch, and it's either you do it yourself or someone else does it. And so I'd highly advise and recommend that every large corporation dedicates a significant amount of their budget towards innovation and incubation, and setting up sort of teams which are almost slightly separate from themselves. I mean, this rhetoric has been heard millions of times before, and yeah, nobody ever listens, and it still keeps happening.
Yeah.
But you need that sort of young innovation team which takes a radical view of the world. And the reason is that the world changes, okay? So we now have, interestingly, we now have a Facebook generation, we have a WhatsApp generation, sorry, we have a Facebook generation, we have an Instagram generation, and we have a TikTok generation.
Yeah, yeah.
Unbelievable.
All within such a short period of time, like.
All within a short period of time.
Yeah.
And their behaviors, engagements, and interactions are completely
Totally
different. So you Facebook folks seem like grandpas now.
Exactly. We do. Definitely.
I'm with the TikTok generation.
Oh, really? You're down with it. You're down with the kids.
Yeah. So you have such huge generational signals which are amplified through technology that it's extremely difficult to understand why and how they're purchasing and what's driving those purchases and what's driving their behavior and their interactions. We know the needs are the same. People still need the basics: clothing, food, healthcare, whatever. But the behaviors are different. And the risk to any organization, at least the ones who are thinking long term, is that change, is that with each of these shifts, what are the new rules? And the same thing keeps happening. It happens over and over and over again. It keep happening. So how do you insulate and protect yourself in that space? And I think that the core of that is down to creating as a habit, innovation as a habit, not as when a crisis, panic, get everybody in the room, let's think about this. No, it's how do we sustain a culture which creates new stuff, which is responding to the market needs, and or fund people who are doing that. So one of the two. It's either you put aside some money to fund and support this, or you create an in-house innovation team.
Yeah.
But really important things to consider in this time.
My final question is this. So, we talk about tech, we're in this lovely bubble. We live in the cities of Africa, Kigali, Lagos, Accra. We're all plugged in, TikTok, Facebook, Insta, like we're all plugged in, but the masses are in a very different situation. So there is a school of thought that says, why all this focus on technology? The most people across Africa will not be plugged into all this kind of high tech stuff. Let's deal with low tech solutions, forget all this emergent technology stuff. What would you say to them?
Rubbish. Well, so you follow the money. You have to absolutely follow the money, and the money now is in mobile money. So you have that. There is a friction between need and access, and you have that that friction is being removed, or the barriers to transactions are being removed by things like mobile money. Now that's the first layer. So once you have that, you now have that your money has been digitized. The question is, how are they buying services and how are they accessing those services? Like I said, Africa is purely rational. It's not going to do anything because it likes or it's fancy or it's whatever it is. It's going to do stuff because it makes economic sense.
Right, it's essential.
And
right.
It's essential, and it's cheaper to transact with mobile money than it is to deal with a bank. So you have that the biggest lenders today are telco companies. So they're aggregating the base, and they're aggregating significant amount of revenue. And it's only a question because that cycle goes upwards. So these people now have access to transactions. The question now is, will that access translate into better education? So will you have that, the skills deficit, which we've talked about now, because they now have access to money. So I'm sitting in my village, I'm going to school, my parents have mobile money. Can education get to me in a manner which allows me significantly earn and stay in my village? You know, is that a new opportunity, a new reality that I don't need to travel anywhere to suddenly move my income barrier through knowledge? So you have that. There are certain things, there are certain significant problems which technology will absolutely just obliterate, with obviously with the right set of things around it. And I think that's the other angle to think through. So what's the real need? And if we could start with the essentials, you know, for example, take things like building houses. Okay. Are there newer materials? Are there newer technologies? We've been involved with a project which looks at the restoration of fish reefs, artificial fish reefs across the West Africa coast.
I remember we talked about this, yeah.
Yes, and it's high tech. It's taking plastics and cements and 3D printing them into artificial reefs, which are driven by massive amounts of computing power, and help us predict the yield of fish stocks from a reef design. But it has significant impact on everyday life. I mean,
the fishing communities, the coastal
fishing community, etc. So there is a place for high tech. The challenge is, how is it deployed? I'm not so convinced about consumer-facing high tech in Africa. I think that its applications are limited in many areas. It will be down to the basic services. And if those services are easier to achieve, there was no real, the smartphone moved from being a luxury device to being a mass market device and essential in a few years, and more so in Africa. And I think that anything which delivers value at the consumer level would do that. But at a business level, we're going to see obviously a significant amount of change and shift on the B2B side. And you have these huge technology interventions which will make a difference at a fundamental level, where if the target is very clearly defined. And so I think it actually calls for bolder bets on high tech.
But with a B2B focus, basically.
With a B2B focus, and a knock-on effect on the
consumer landscape. Yeah, I understand.
Landscape. Okay. So more technology, not less.
Okay. I'm not surprised by your answer, of course. Okay, and I said my last one was my final question, but what would your top tips be for entrepreneurs that are looking to seriously scale up their businesses across locations on the continent and globally?
Talk to lots of people. So the real challenge we have is not being able to validate our own ideas, or not being close enough to the problems to have a good chance of making a difference. So I think the number one tip is just talk to loads of people. You'll get good feedback, you'll get bad feedback, some will tell you stuff, but you need to have loads of conversations on that. And really keep it simple. Just focus on what creates money. Money is the scoring system. It represents that you're creating value which people find useful. And so stick with that. It's hard, it's tough. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. But we absolutely have to focus there.
Okay, I have so many questions for you. I could go and talk to you all day, because I had a question pop into my mind about, of course, AI. Everyone's talking about AI, but how do we create AI infrastructure for more businesses, because we're talking about B2B, AI seems it's still very real because everyone's talking about it, but it's very abstract because
Very esoteric.
people. Yeah. So what would you say to kind of, again, increasing the availability of AI services, or, providers who can integrate into real businesses to enable them to scale, and also to obviously solve bigger problems in a more efficient way?
So all the major telcos at the moment are using AI in multiple ways. So Vodafone launched a chatbot which does their customer service.
Yeah.
And we're seeing chatbots which are selling insurance. We're seeing chatbots in healthcare. We're seeing chatbots in customer service. So that's one level. We're seeing AI on the back end fighting fraud. So especially in things like mobile money, you have that, and from a big business point of view. So I think we're going to see a cascading downwards. The early adopters are big businesses where this sort of technology will make a significant difference in their revenues. So these are the first guys to go for it and say, hey, this if I can cut the fraud on mobile money from 4% to 1%, it's millions of dollars saved.
Yeah.
If I can cut my customer service costs by X, Y, Z, Y, delivering a service. So they will sort of be early adopters, refine the technology. But you're a small business, you're starting out, you're one man everything.
Yeah.
You need to be your own customer service. You need to be your own accountant.
Yeah. Marketer.
Everything.
Yeah.
And this is where technology comes in, because with the right solutions, it actually amplifies what you can do. So you can have a little AI chatbot taking care of your customer service, one doing your accounting, one doing your this, that, in ways which don't feel like that. So
exactly.
it's almost
it's very personable. Yeah.
Very personable, very intuitive. It's a service. You do this, you do that. So I think that's the entrepreneurial opportunity. AI is like the internet. It's an enabler. It's not a thing in of itself.
Right.
It's going to have impact across several different industries. Fundamental, groundbreaking, shifting impact. So far, we've just used it to make ourselves look nicer in Zoom calls and on TikTok videos and Instagram.
Right.
But even that in itself it's amazing, because you have that all these filters and screens on the lighter side of things are making people find husbands, which are very
That's a really a very good example.
Yes, mass impact of AI on the finding of spouses, a really
people's love
important
lives.
problem.
Yes.
And people's love lives.
It's a real problem to solve, actually.
A real problem to solve.
Saving hearts and minds. Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
Ehi, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure's mine.
It's been good to have a chat with you. And let's see what we can do to help more of our entrepreneurs that are ready to grow to really do so. And we'll talk to you soon.
And thanks for having us and thinking of us and doing all the stuff you do. I mean, we have significant deficits when it comes to growing our businesses and engaging, and it's important for folks like you who make it possible. So we're truly thankful.
Thank you, Ehi. We really appreciate the feedback, and let's talk soon.